listening to the Virtual CISO podcast, providing the best insight on information security and security IT advice to business leaders everywhere.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the Virtual CISO podcast. With you, as always, your host, John Verry. And with me today, I think a two-time appearer, if that is a word, on the podcast, Andrew Frost. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going well. Let's just say I'm glad it's Friday, though.
Yes.
Always start simple. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do every day.
Okay, my name is Andrew Frost. I am a GRC consultant at Pivot Point Security. Been here for 4.5 years now. Before that, I was actually working for a client of Pivot Point Security, running their ISMS. So, I've been doing, ISMS, ISO related stuff for 6 or 7 years now. And I'm not going to go any further back in my history, but
you didn't have a paper route. You didn't. Your mom didn't give you 25 cents to vacuum in the kitchen after dinner every night. I mean, all right.
Well, yeah.
So,
that's it.
so
mostly what I do, though, and I missed that part of the question, was I do ISMS implementations for our clients, and I do internal audits, but more maintenance and implementations than anything.
Right, and with a bulk of that work being ISO 27001, but of course it's other frameworks as well. The SOC 2s and the whatnots of the world as well.
Correct.
Cool. So this one's going to be an interesting one because I know the answer to the question. So I don't know if I should change the question or just leave it. So I'll just leave it and I know bourbon is your drink of choice, generally speaking. Anything interesting that you're drinking these days, either bourbon or other than that?
Well, I'm gonna go where I would disagree with you because I know we disagree on.
You're not allowed to disagree with me at all on this. This is my podcast. It's the Virtual CISO podcast.
But you don't like Scotch.
Oh, I hate Scotch. Yeah, it's Pete ruins. It's a whiskey ruined by Pete.
So, we drink. Yeah, me and my wife. Sorry, we both drink the same stuff. We both drink Scotch and we both drink bourbon. I agree with you on the bourbon side. The other part we don't agree on is neat versus on the rocks. So I prefer both neat with a drop of water.
I think. Look, I like when that I'm drinking a really nice bottle of My Lemon Green that someone picked out for me. That I'm very appreciative of, and I think that is a perfect bourbon to drink neat with a little bit of water. It just really blooms, really opens up when you drink it. So I agree with you completely. All right, so let's get down to business. I think anybody that lives like us in the ISO 27001 world, the ISO cybersecurity community, so to speak, we've had some big news over the last few months. ISO 27001 has been updated from 2013 to 2022. So I'll ask you, how has ISO 27001 remained the same, and how has it changed?
Okay, so ISO 27001 itself, let's not talk about the Annex A controls yet. We'll get there. Has not changed much. The guidance is mostly the same. The language is mostly the same. There's a few tweaks here and there, but in terms of the management system, there's not much different. Mm-hmm. What changed more is in the Annex controls, which are also covered in ISO 27002, and a lot of it had to do with changes in the industry. Everyone's moving to the cloud. There's a lot more privacy regulations now. So those are really the big things. I think, while 27001 still has what I would call light touch on privacy compared to 27701 and 27018, privacy protections now, it's actually in the standard title. So they added it to the title. They added a few controls that I think point directly towards protecting PII, like information deletion and data masking, and even data leakage prevention. They're really about protecting PII. And I think the the one privacy control that was there before is now, maybe like 4 controls. You can think of it,
Right.
if you
So,
include those 3 new ones.
so when you said the ISMS is largely the same, just to be clear, we're talking about clauses 4 through 10
Correct.
are largely the same, right? So the recipe for the actual management system of ISO is largely the same with just a couple minor changes.
There's a few minor changes. There's an additional control, which is a one-liner that says basically you need to control your changes within your ISMS.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for some reason, they reversed the order of the 10 of clause 10.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. So one was the nonconformity versus corrective action. I forgot the order they were in, but now they're in the reverse order. So 10.1 is now 10.2, and 10.2 is now 10.1.
Yeah, that's weird. Just enough to
Just to
mix up the
confuse us.
people that are really comfortable with the standard. And
Exactly.
then so let's talk a little bit about what I was intrigued by when I looked at it was the obvious, I think, like you said, reaction to what's changed between 2013 and 2022. So you mentioned, and I think that's mostly, I don't know if you'd agree with me, mostly reflected in the new controls that we see.
Mhm.
So you mentioned the 3 controls that are, I think, related to privacy, and I think you could argue are a direct response to things like GDPR and CCPA. What are some of the other changes, and what do you see as being the rationale or reasoning behind the fact that we needed this new control?
Okay, yeah, and I mentioned I briefly touched on cloud. So there's a new much needed control for cloud services because we had nothing specifically about cloud because in 2013 cloud wasn't really as big. Now everyone is using some kind of cloud service, even if it's for Office 365 that's a cloud service now. So they had to add a control for that, and the control is, while it's very written at a very high level, there's 2 pages of guidance in the standard for it.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 pages of guidance really get into more detailed vendor management, making sure you're picking the right cloud service provider, making sure you can move away from that cloud service provider, and move your data, portability of data and things of that nature.
Question. Is it so? Is that control more focused on cloud consumption, or does it also because like 27017 has a consumption side and a provider side? Does the new control, is that just consumption side?
It is. And that was when I first started reading the standard, that was an area of confusion for me, I'll admit. But when you read like at the very bottom in not very big letters, it says this is for the use of cloud services. I mean, the control is called the use of cloud services,
Okay.
but you don't think of it that way when you first start going into it because it's cloud.
Right. And so many of your customers are cloud service providers as well as cloud service consumers. So I think you have a tendency to think from the side that you're working on, right? Helping organizations get prepped for certification.
And the other part is if you're looking at 27017 from the use perspective, it's very similar to this new control. If you're looking at the provider side, it's obviously very different.
So that would be why people would continue to use 27017. So a pure consumer of the cloud probably no longer needs 27017, but a cloud service provider probably still would benefit from it.
Pretty much, yes. I would definitely agree with that.
Cool. What else is new,
So,
and why do you think that they added it?
well, one of the areas that I was thinking about is configuration management. So that's a new control, but it's something that we always kind of skirted around. We always looked at it when we looked at network security, when we looked at security of software development environments, but it was never an auditable control. It was so now we have this control, configuration management. We're going to make sure there's a policy that says this is how we're doing it. This is how we're making sure that we're have hardening standards and we're following those and we're making sure that they don't change over time, etc. So that's a really good one, even though I think we were kind of doing it before. Um, some of the other ones are threat intelligence, which a lot of these were being done by most clients. I think that there's less of an uplift in some cases than you think there might be, because you might be doing a lot of these controls already in one way or another. Threat intelligence is a good example of that. You're probably doing that by, you know, the control for special interest groups. You're following, you know, like CISO or whatever, and getting vulnerability information back, finding out, you know, what's coming, what threats are coming on the horizon, and what you should be looking out for. You're being notified about 0-day vulnerabilities, and you know, you're already getting that threat intelligence. You're just not documenting that in a policy, possibly. What other ones? I'm trying to think. Physical.
What are the ICT readiness for business continuity?
I mean, that's another one that I think was
we were covering anyway. Yeah, so a lot of this is just, I think, formalization, like,
mm-hmm.
you know, much the same way ISO documents the things that you are often doing. You know, I think in a weird way, 27001 2022 documents what we were already doing with 2013 in many instances.
Correct. I mean, especially that one. That ICT readiness for business continuity is basically disaster recovery, which, you know, was part of most companies', you know, BCDR plan. That's why it was called that. I think one of the other ones I was thinking about was, you know, physical security monitoring. Like, that's basically camera coverage. And one of the areas that we'll get into, you know, that we haven't gotten into yet is, like, they added these hashtags that to the controls. So they describe at the beginning of the control, you know, if it should be preventive or corrective, or what. Basically, it helps you understand what they mean by what you want to do with that control, or what they want you to do with that control. So, like, physical security monitoring was one I was actually talking to a client about recently, because when you look at it, it says you need to have 24/7 monitoring. You know, I mean, it doesn't say that, but you think, oh, do we have to have 24/7 all the time monitoring, making sure, you know, there's a security guard watching cameras at all times? And, you know, if you think about it, physical security monitoring could just be recording, or it could be, you know, someone watching it. So when you look at those hashtags for that control, it's actually listed as detective and preventive. So that led us to believe that maybe, you know, there should be some kind of monitoring, or at least review on a regular basis, or at the very least, you should document that as a risk, that you don't have 24/7 monitoring.
Yeah, the hashtags are interesting, and let's make sure we touch on those a little bit deeper, because I'm curious as to how you see people using them, and how you think auditors are going to use them, because I think that's going to be an important component. And then I think the last major change that I noted was there were some controls that I think were directly relating to, I think, our shift into the agile DevOps infrastructure as code world. I think, you know, the secure coding, the data masking, and the configuration management, I think, kind of point to that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, secure coding is one that I almost didn't feel like it was needed in a way. I mean, with all the secure development controls that were there before, we were always looking to make sure that code was secure. We were always looking to make sure that there was some kind of, you know, some kind of review of code to making sure that it was. I mean, I think it's adding some policies, formalizing it, like you said. In most cases, we're just formalizing things that were already being done. Cool. And that's a good one, a good example of one.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about someone who is moving towards certification. So if someone's just getting certified for the first time, how soon can they get certified to ISO 27001 2022? And can they still get certified to ISO 27001 2013?
Okay, so first of all, like, many of the registrars are ready or will be soon ready to certify. They don't have to be ready until I think October 2023, because that's 12 months. So, okay, so there's this document that's called the IAF MD 26, which is the International Accreditation Forum's mandatory document 26, which basically is a document for the registrars, the accreditation bodies, to tell them what they need to do and when they need to do things. And I'll probably be referring to that document a few more times, so I wanted to make sure to bring that up. So per that document, they have 12 months from the date that ISO 27001:2022 was published to get certified to certify. I forgot what that terminology is, but accredited to certify. So that's basically, basically they should be ready to do it soon. I think most of them are doing it before then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a couple are ready now, as I understand it.
Correct. But back to the original question, like per that same document, IAF MD 26, they now have 18 months from the publication date to start their 2013 audit.
Okay.
So
that'd be like almost like April of 2024, roughly, because it came out October. I think it was October.
Exactly.
31st.
It's April.
April 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So in other words, so you could probably get certified now if you pick the right registrar, and if you are already down the path and you've prepared your whole ISMS using 2013, you've got another effectively year to go through your certification audit.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So let's talk about the other side of that coin. So if you are already certified, how soon can they transition to ISO 27001:2022?
I mean, they can transition whenever they want. It's, obviously without having an additional expense or much of an additional expense, you want to wait until at least your first surveillance audit.
Okay.
Or your next surveillance audit or next recertification audit. We're mostly recommending that people wait until 2024 if they can, just because the auditors are still starting, like they haven't even started to audit it yet. We don't know how they're going to audit it yet. There could be interpretations that we haven't seen, so I think we're kind of trying to lean towards getting people to start looking to transition in 2024 or the end of 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you live on the working with the clients, to do the work, and I live on the talking to the clients about what they want to do or should do. And it's interesting because many clients are looking to move soon. I think they see it as a competitive differentiator. I think they see it as thought leadership. So I think we're going to have an interesting blend of people. I also think it depends on when you're doing it. If you're scheduled for a surveillance or recertification audit this summer, or early fall, you're probably putting yourself in harm's way to have to try to squeeze all those changes in that period of time. However, I think if you were looking at, like I know it personally, right, as Pivot Point Security is an ISO certified company, our next surveillance audit is in February. We'll make the transition for that one.
And we have, I know one client I'm working with now is their certification audit or their surveillance audit is in January. It's actually a recertification audit, and they're going to be doing 2022.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It'll be interesting. I think you can make an argument both ways. I think to some extent, some people might have a few arrows in the back. I think on the other side of the coin, I think you're going to get more leeway as the auditors are figuring their way as well.
That's true.
So,
and the worst thing that happens is you get a nonconformity that you fix.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The reality is, I think you said it well. It's really a formalization of many of the things that you were doing anyway. So I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be more a paperwork exercise than it's going to be a significant change in the way you conduct operations. And I think the likelihood of you having nonconformities of significance around the actual operation of the control are probably not that high. It might be just in the way that you document some of the things.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So as you said, it's probably not that hard if you do end up with a nonconformity to correct it. So we talked about they can get certified soon, and some of the, they'll have to figure out when works for them. What's the latest they can transition?
it's 3 years from October 2022, so it's October 2025, the end of the month, and I think they have to be completed again because based on that IAF document, the audit has to be complete. I'm not sure. It says completed. I don't know if that means the audit has to be completed or they actually have to have certification in hand. I read it as the audit has to be completed.
Okay, so basically 10/31/2025.
Yes.
Okay, and then you said that the likely path for doing this would be either to do it during a recertification or a surveillance audit. Do you think there's a big difference in doing it in one or the other?
There isn't, and it basically adds a half a day. Like if you do it in a surveillance year, the registrar is required to add a day to your audit to basically do what they call what they're calling a transition audit, where they're going to look at your transition plan, which is either a gap assessment or just a list of what you did. Like, and that's a requirement that we haven't talked about. They're required to look at a transition plan. You have to have something documented that says this is what we did. Either in most cases it's going to be a gap assessment or something. But they're going to look at that. They're going to say, okay, what changes did you make for the uplift? And then they're going to look at the 11 net new controls and your SOA, maybe your risk assessment if you need to update that. But basically it's a half a day added if you're doing a surveillance audit year. No, wait, did I get that backwards? It's an extra half a day on a surveillance audit year, on a recertification year, and an extra day on a surveillance audit year. That's what I did get it backwards.
So netted out, it's really, that's not going to be a decisive factor in deciding when you're ready to do it.
Right. It's basically a half a day of auditor time, which is a half a day of cost, which I don't know how that calculates out.
It's probably $1,500 or $2,000 or something of that nature.
And it's a half a day of your time in an audit, possibly.
So let's talk about what's the level of effort and what does the actual transition look like in terms of work effort?
So basically, most of your policies are going to have to change at least minorly, especially if you have a reference section in your policies, because every single one of those is going to have to change the reference section at the very least. There's some documentation that needs to, in most cases, added to policies for the 11 new controls. The only probable new, like entirely new policy that I think you have to have is configuration management, but you can even argue that could go into the secure development policy or another policy or the network configuration, the network management policy. Your updated scope document, you definitely have to update the SOA because the SOA is going to point to all the new Annex A controls. That's one of the bigger changes. But yeah, like I said, most of the policy changes are not major.
Okay. Remind me to circle back when we talk about the hashtags, because I'm curious as to whether or not you think risk methodology and risk assessment if auditors are going to look for changes to the methodology based on some of those hashtags.
Well, I did kind of mention that before briefly because.
Oh, you want? Let's dig into it now then.
Yeah, basically, the way I was picturing that one control, the physical security, the monitoring control, is that if you're not doing it because the hashtag says preventive, if you don't have preventive control, I would think that you would want that in your risk register to say we know that we don't have a preventive control, but we don't need it because we're accepting the risk of not having that as preventive control, and we'll just review the video on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or something.
Or you could argue that the detective control, or add a corrective control, and claim that that is a good compensating control.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is I'm wondering what that, the other thing too is that I was wondering on the risk assessment, right? In ISO 27001, we know how we have the language in, I forget which one of the, probably the planning clause, where you're asking how you consider the impact to confidentiality, integrity, and availability when you're implementing controls and in your risk assessment. And I know that they have the CIA hashtags as well.
Right.
So I was wondering whether or not we were going to see auditors start to ask that question when you're looking at a risk. Is that a risk to confidentiality, integrity, or availability, or some combination thereof?
It's really hard to say.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things where I'm excited to see how the auditors are actually going to approach it. But I mean, I could definitely see how you can improve your risk register by using some of those hashtags.
Yeah, how you can, and I'm going to go a step further. How you can, because ISO has a security component and a compliance component, like every framework does. And I think where sometimes the compliance component can be used to drive changes in security. So an auditor insisting that you do something can have a positive net effect where you can just, if they're not enforcing it, you could do it unilaterally. And I think the idea of considering CIA and considering, as you're implementing controls, whether or not they're preventative, detective, corrective, I think those things could be beneficial to effectively managing risk in an environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I don't know if it's going to be audited that way, but I could definitely see it helping your security.
Yeah, I could see more advanced clients updating the risk methodology to incorporate that.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
What else we got to cover here? Let's see. So let's talk about how to get there, right? So we know we're gonna make these changes. How do we know to make those changes? So in a typical organization, how are we going to recommend the most effective and efficient way to initiate and execute this transition?
So we currently have two ways we're planning on going about doing this for our clients. The first way would be maybe we add some time to your internal audit, like a half a day or a day, and do a gap assessment of these 11 net new controls, as part of the audit, but it's really a gap assessment, and provide like a separate transition plan, which then they can use either with us or without us to do the uplift. The other thing we could do is a full transition, which is a full gap assessment with a risk refresh, and then help with the policy uplift. So that that would be the more hands-on model that that we would work closer with you on.
Yeah, so that's going to be that would be a more robust way of doing it, right? Where you're going in ahead of time and doing it from a consultative perspective, as opposed to doing it as an ISMS internal audit, where we're just giving them the detail on what needs to change in the environment.
Correct.
And then, just generally speaking, we're going to have to add, I guess, a little bit of time to, much like the auditors do, a little bit of time to internal audits in that year one transition to kind of accommodate the extra 11 controls and the minor changes and clauses.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I haven't figured out how much time that is yet, but there'll be a little bit of extra time there.
Okay, gotcha. So we got ISO 27001:2022. What I noticed, and I only noticed it today, that there's a 27005:2022. Did you see that had come out? I logged into Text. No, I didn't see. I didn't know it either. But I logged into TechStreet. I wonder if I still have it open. No, I don't. But I logged into TechStreet today, to get a copy of another copy of 27,001 2022 because I was working on a different computer, and I was surprised that 27,005 2022 popped up.
Oh.
So that's news. Look forward to looking at that. So we've got 27,001, 27,002, 27,005. We don't have 27,017, 27,018, and 27,701. How will that impact a client if they're using 27,017 as an example or 27,701? How will that impact their work and their transition?
This is a little tricky. So first of all, 27,701, there is a new version in development. I think it's in like what they call level 40 of the 100 steps in the process. But so my guess is it won't be published until late this year. And that's my guess. I don't know if that's true. So there will be a new version of that. 27,017, there's also a new version in development, but I think that's even further back, and I don't see any indication of 27,018 being updated. So I think for now, what our clients are going to have to do the mapping themselves. In 27, I think it's in 2702 2022 in the standard in the back in the appendix, there's actually, it has the mapping from the old to the new.
Mm-hmm.
So you can utilize those tables to kind of back map those three standards as well. But there's no clean way to do it because they haven't given us, new versions of the standards that map to the new version of Annex A.
Okay. So what you're saying is that the translation tables at the end of 27,000, so it's mapping 27,013 to 27,022. And so if you know that 27,701 Control A maps to Control B 27,013, which maps to Control C 27,001:2022, hence we know how to map 27,701 to 27,002 2022.
Now just say all that again one more time.
I'm not sure I said it. I'm not even sure I said it correctly. This is like, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right?
Correct.
Right.
That's
so
right.
I think the average person listening probably followed that better than what I tried to do earlier than that. All right. Anything else? We beat this up pretty good. Anything else that you think we should chat about?
I would recommend that people that are transitioning to download that IAF MD26 I talked about. It's a free download. It's very informative. It tells you in a lot of detail like what changed in. I'll make sure you get issue 2, by the way, because issue 1 and issue 2 are very different and they're both out there. Issue 2 has all the dates that I talked about earlier. It has some details about what changed in ISO 27001 in the clauses, those minor changes that I was talking about. And I also recommend that purchasing ISO 27001 and 27001 and 27002, not only because you have to have them to follow the standards, but it always obviously helps to have that. Plus, auditors sometimes look for you to make sure that you have them.
Yeah, no, I've been sitting at the table when somebody got called on not having a copy of 27,000, not having an officially licensed copy of ISO 27,002.
Yeah, and I've written up people for not having
it. So. All right.
And the other side note that I wanted to make is that the guidance in 2702, while it reads like something that you have to do, it's not something that you have to do. This was true in 2013 as well. It's guidance. It's not, this is what you have to do. This is kind of how we think you might want to do this. So don't take it as instructions, take it as guidance like it is.
So it's not thou shall, it's thou shall think about.
Exactly.
Yeah. I always tell people when they look at 27,002 and they think about rationalizing a thought process to an auditor about why they did or didn't do something that was listed in there. I always use the analogy, if you're sitting at a bar with a friend over a beer and you're explaining why you did or didn't implement, passwords at a certain length or multi-factor authentication, and that person's moderately knowledgeable in information security, if you can make an argument where your friend says, yeah, that makes sense, then you're going to be fine during an audit.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, give me, I don't know if you're prepared, and you're not allowed to reuse whatever you said the first time, and I'll remember. Give me a fictional character, real-world person you think would make an amazing or horrible CISO, and why.
I kind of got a better answer. So I'm switching the topic to AI a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
Because last time I said Sheldon Cooper. So, and
that's the Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to be different, I decided to ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT came back with Sherlock Holmes on the first try.
Somebody else has said Sherlock Holmes before. So that's interesting that ChatGPT. So did ChatGPT give you a reason why?
Oh my God, I don't have it in front of me, but it was a book. It was very descriptive. But then I asked it again, and the second time it picked Tony Stark.
And somebody's given Iron Man before as well. I think, you know what I think this is? All kidding aside, I wonder, because ChatGPT, I don't know if how much have you used ChatGPT?
I've been using it a lot.
Me too.
It's really helpful. Like,
it's crazy, but it is shoot, why am I drawing a blank on the word when you use somebody's works directly?
Plagiarism.
Like, sorry about that. It plagiarizes. Like, I mean, like, you can find the same exact language that it gives you in its responses directly off of people's websites. And I'm really curious. I'm really curious the fact that you asked it twice, and both times it gave an answer that it could find on our website.
Oh, now I have to compare the description to our website.
It would be really interesting to see whether or not its rationale was some of the rationale that the individual gave. I think it's really interesting. Like, AI is crazy stuff, and it's amazing that it's able to interpret what you're doing. But I do wonder how much it's directly using the materials that it's trained on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really neat though.
Have you talked to Rory at all about the way he uses it? Because he does this thing where he gets it into a conversation. You can enter something called prompt mode, and you tell it that you want to enter prompt mode, and then it prompts you to help you create better and better prompts. Like it becomes the prompter.
Oh.
And it'll create a prompt, and then it'll give you suggestions about how to improve that prompt. And then you tell it which of those suggestions would help you. And then it iterates the prompt again.
Oh, that's cool.
He did something that was nutty where he laid out like a professional development program for achieving a particular certification, and what would be the best way to do that, what materials would he study, and it gave him like this amazing plan, and he did it through this prompt mode. Yeah, ping him and get the prompt mode. I can't really explain it because he's smarter than me, but I will tell you it was pretty damn cool. And I haven't figured out how to use it yet. The
last thing I had to tell you that I did with ChatGPT is I asked it if Sheldon would be a great CISO, and it said no.
Now here's the question: did you say Sheldon would be a good or a bad CISO when
I
you
said
were on the
good.
podcast? Oh,
so ChatGPT
is smarter than you, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, man. If someone wants to get in contact with you,
well, Andrew Frost at Pivot Point Security, or LinkedIn. Andrew R. Frost is my / or whatever you call it. My LinkedIn handle.
This has been fun as always, sir. Have yourself an awesome weekend.
I will. You too. Thanks so much.